afternoon.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. And
Good,
yourself?
good. Yeah, very well. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us. For anybody that is watching now or indeed later, if you don't know me, my name is Simona Hamblett and I am a leadership and lifestyle coach for professionals, helping them towards whatever goals or dreams they may have. And with me today, I have James Banfield of The Liberated Mind. And James is a specialist expert in hypnotherapy, well, the combination of hypnotherapy with NLP, coaching and neuroscience. So thank you so much for joining me today, James.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. I know that I find this topic fascinating, and I'll come on to sort of hopefully adding something as we go through the conversation. But first of all, I think it's always nice to start with finding out your journey into it. So how did you start down this path? How did you get interested in hypnotherapy and beyond?
It's a little bit of an accident, to be fair. I was always very interested in self-development, and it came from a difficult childhood. There were a lot of deaths in the family in quite quick succession due to cancer. And it has an effect on a young boy and the rest of the family. And I think it was almost like a way of trying to help myself. And so I got very into that self-development stuff. Started with Tony Robbins and then got more into the sort of spiritual stuff and all of that. But I was always fascinated by psychology. I did psychology A-level, and but I never intended to do it as a career. I was always a musician, and it was always a hobby. It was always just for me. But I think because of the kind of person I am, people naturally open up to me, and I got pretty good at this stuff, and I would just offer a few little tips and things. And it just happened where my music career had kind of hit a bit of a plateau, and I was on a train and I was helping someone out in the way that I normally do. And he was just about to get off the train and he said, "You know what, you'd be a really good life coach." And it was like a light bulb moment. I was like, yeah, that's interesting. And I kind of looked into that. I became a coach first. And then I somehow transitioned into NLP. And I think the reason for that was because I realized that a lot of my clients had issues that I just couldn't deal with through coaching. And I actually still do coaching, but I won't let people get to that unless they sort of sort out the skeletons in their closet. Because when you're sort of seeing the world through a filter of your past and all that baggage, it's like trying to solve a problem from the same level that created it. You can't do it. So I moved into NLP. For those of you that don't know what NLP is, that's neuro-linguistic programming. It's kind of where CBT came from, actually. It was the original. It kind of took all the best of various therapies at the time, including hypnosis, and it created a system that was very efficient. It was the very best of everything, and you could replicate it. So anyone that knew these skills could actually help someone create positive change in their life. But I thought I would like to get the full set. So I moved into hypnotherapy last. And over the last sort of 3 years, I've been developing a system that sort of helps people. I call it a mind reboot. It's basically a system that just really clears the decks. It literally gets rid of all of those traumas, all of those emotional triggers, all of those limiting beliefs, and all these habits and things that it's like a 4-session thing. It's very rare that people need to have more than that, but then they can move into a coaching relationship if they want to. So that's really how it came about. And I now train people on how to use this process, this program. I would like to say that this is not an ego thing. This is not I did not design these techniques, but what I did was I kind of took the best of everything again and put it into a system that was very systematic. So it was very structured, and it was just a very efficient way of clearing everything in a very short amount of time. So once you've been through that, then you are ready to either leave me and go and have a wonderful life, or you can carry on coaching and then work on, improving life. So you've dealt with all the issues, and now it's about how I can move towards those goals and things that I want in my life. So I hope that was a good summary for you.
It is. It's also covered quite a lot. So, we're definitely going to unpick that. And if anybody has any questions, do pop them in as we go along, and I will pass them on to James to answer them. Okay, so where to start? Well, let's start with hypnotherapy in itself, because I think there's there's a few thoughts around hypnotherapy that perhaps people, some misunderstandings around hypnotherapy potentially. We've got this idea that somebody else will have control over you. These shows of people, turning into chickens on stage, and then, what if they don't turn back, and somebody at the click of a finger can turn them back into chickens at any time. Yeah. And then we've got, sort of people that have really focused and talked about past life regression, which some people may or may not be comfortable with. And I think a lot of people who perhaps aren't thinking of those two things can quite often focus on, either a phobia or, trying to stop something like, stopping smoking. So if we focus on some of the misunderstandings first, and then the value of, hypnotherapy around phobias and that area, and then we can sort of really look into this mind reboot, I think. So let's talk about misunderstandings first.
Okay, so it's the biggest kind of issue that I come up against when people first come to me is, what is hypnosis? Is it this I've seen on the TV? Is it mind control? Everything that you've just said. The one thing I would say to you is you cannot make someone do what they don't want to do, in the sense that when you see someone on television, first of all, they're usually on a night out. They may have had a few drinks, but even if they haven't, the difference is they volunteer, right? They go up on stage. Now, your unconscious mind it has a prime directive of keeping you safe and also helping you get things that you want, right? So it will not cooperate unless you allow it to allow you to do that, right? So generally there's you're on stage, you're in front of all these people now, you kind of conform, you kind of go with the flow a little bit, but there is also that agreement and that buy into, and yes, there's a certain amount of suggestion, but since you volunteered, it's kind of like you kind of have to agree to it. So there is that to consider. Also, I would say that everybody is in trance multiple times a day.
Yes.
When you're driving a car, have you ever driven somewhere and then you get there and you're like, I have no idea how I got here? And you think that's really unsafe, but actually it's not. It's just that either the journey so well, and your unconscious is absolutely in control there, but your conscious mind is wandering off. And if something did run out on the road, you would react because it would kick back in. But it's basically a learning state. An interesting experiment they did actually is when you watch TV, for example, your brain starts moving into alpha and theta alpha, not theta, very quickly. In fact, they linked brains up to TVs and they saw how long people could actually keep the TV on for, because the moment it went into alpha, the TV would switch off because they had it linked to the brain waves. Less than a minute for every single person. The point I'm trying to make is whether you're running, reading a book, or just going about your day, you are slipping into this learning state that we call trance. And when you're in that state, you're extremely suggestible. Now, that is actually an important point to make when we talk about the reboot later, in the sense that how these programs and triggers and things are created are between the ages of 1 to 7. And during that time, you're constantly in trance, right? So that's something to bear in mind. Something I would also say about the habits thing, it's a bit like, and it's a little discovery I made as well, which actually the habit is never the problem. Okay, habit is a coping mechanism. It's your way of dealing with what's really going on underneath that. So let me give you an example that everyone can probably relate to, which is the New Year's resolution, right? So you eat too much, you drink too much, you smoke too much, all of that kind of stuff. And you're like, right, new start, beginning of the year. And for a few weeks, you kind of do it, but then life happens, right? Stress levels go up and habits come back. And it's usually because something will happen out here that will trigger usually a belief or a feeling that you don't want to feel, which is why a lot of people can't actually be on their own, or can't actually not have some kind of stimulus going on in the background all the time, because they don't want to think, they don't want to feel. Because when they do those two things, this stuff starts coming up. And it comes up because your body's saying, are you going to look at this yet? Are you going to deal with this? Now, some people are running away from that for their whole lives. But the point I'm trying to make is the stress levels come up, or something happens out here that triggers those feelings and that belief. And instantly you move to the primitive brain and you go to your go-to, which is, in your case, might be smoking, drinking, or whatever it is for you. And then, of course, the cycle goes into guilt. Oh, I've messed up. And then it goes round and round and round. And it's not just the New Year's resolution. It happens all year round. So when someone comes to me and they say, I'd like to give up smoking, I say, I'm not going to take your cigarettes away from you, because your unconscious mind is listening right now, and it's going to be, who are you? And this thing works. So it's not about the smoking. It's about dealing with the root cause of that, whatever that might be, whatever trauma, belief, or whatever it is that's there, so that you can choose either just not to smoke, or you can find something that gives you the same hit or outcome that the cigarette gives you that's healthier for you. But the difference is, it's not a need anymore. It's not trying to medicate or take something away, a pain or a feeling. It simply becomes a choice. So again, with drinking, obviously, some people like a drink, right? So just saying it's all or nothing isn't particularly helpful a lot of the time, because they want to carry on having a drink. The difference is, when you deal with those root causes, suddenly it becomes I'm going to have a drink and then I'm going to stop. Whereas before, I have a drink and I can't stop because it's that habit thing. So the habit, there will be a bit of a habit there that we'll have to sort of break at the end a little bit. But really, and this is why a lot of people keep coming back and they say the therapy didn't work or the smoking thing didn't work. It did, but it's just that the thing underneath it wasn't solved.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does to me. But also I've got more experience of it. And yes, and it is, as you say, that there are these different levels to it. And in pure coaching, for want of a better phrase, we're dealing with things up here, and we can tackle some of them. It depends on the depth of the thing that we're coaching in. But also, if we look at the trance, as you say, there are a lot of people that don't want to look there, or can't yet look there. I think perhaps is, they feel that they can't yet look there, or they don't know how to look there. But the other kind of part of being in that trance is actually, we also, I think most of us, if not all of us, can relate to that moment of trance when we're driving, in the shower, when we're running, or whatever it is that we do, sewing, knitting, where actually we have our greatest clarity, we have our greatest wisdom, our moments. And I used to recall that I used to enjoy part of my drive to work, because it allowed me to think things as I was going in and clear my head around things, and likewise coming back from work. So there are, I think we can see that if we can move ourselves into that trance state, and then we've got something positive as well that's supporting us in that state, that helps us to get our better thinking, or helps us to shift something that we can't analytically shift, we can see the balance of that.
It's an interesting point, actually. Something I'd like to just bear in mind there is that, it's more like subtractive psychology, yes. Right? We're not adding things or trying to cover it up. We're actually removing everything that is not serving you. But also it's in terms of when your mind, like, this is why mindfulness is also very powerful, because when you've got nothing on your mind, you are confident. You can think clearly. All of these things are natural, innate things that come through. But that, as you say, sometimes trying to sort things out intellectually doesn't work with coaching, because there is a feeling. It's like the brain splits, right? There's the conscious mind here that can make 1,000 reasons why they shouldn't be feeling like this. And affirmations are a really good example of this. There was a really big, and there still are, it's very fashionable to do these positive affirmations. However, there is a part of your brain at the back called the reticular activating system, and it basically listens to everything that you're saying. And if it doesn't fit with your existing belief structure, it will say, that doesn't resonate with me, or that, and it kind of filters in everything. It finds evidence that proves you right about what you believe, and it filters everything else out. So if you say, I'm a strong, confident, independent woman, or something like that, He goes, you don't believe that. So what you have to do is you have to start introducing things that are kind of on the way to what you would like. Like, I'm starting to feel a little bit more confident today. And it will go, actually, that's true, because then the evidence will start coming in. It's like a search engine. It goes, that person smiled at you, or you feel a bit more confident today, or whatever it might be. So again, this split that happens, the reason that coaching sometimes it can't deal with some of the deeper stuff is because we need to get to where that feeling's coming from and what happened to make you feel like that. And the belief that's really deeply ingrained, think about it, a belief becomes the context or the filter through which every conversation and decision and interaction that you have, it's based on, what am I going to respond based on this thing that I believe about myself? And you may not even remember consciously what that belief is, but your responses, like, have you ever been in a situation where you keep agreeing to do things that you don't want to do? And then after you finish with the conversation, like, why did I do that? It's not a choice. It's driven. Your thoughts, your emotions, and your behavior is driven from that limiting belief, whether you want to or not. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes those limiting beliefs, as I say, can be worked through analytically. They can be worked through, but some can't. You know, there is that deeper thing. And as you say, what we're trying to do is clear that out the way, because it's a kind of a blocked information coming into the alternative to an extent. You know, if we, you know, believe something, then that's what we're going to notice. And every time we notice that thing, our brain goes, yep, that's another tick to prove that point. And that's great if we're believing, you know, affirming positive, useful things, because our brain's going, yep, great. If the other is happening and that filter, that block isn't helpful, then unfortunately, that's all, you know, we're going to either not notice the things that are the opposite to that, or we're not going to believe it, or we're going to discount it or dismiss it as a one-off fluke, or they can't possibly have been right. And so it is shifting that, how we're looking at that.
It is. One of the first questions I will ask a client is, how do you feel when someone gives you a compliment? Right? And they'll be like, oh, I hate it. I can't stand it. I get really awkward. I just have to move away. And some people will actually get quite defensive, and they will start sort of hailing abuse at somebody, because, like you say, in their mind, it doesn't match that belief system. And therefore you're just being nice, or why are you saying that? It's almost like you want to beat them up or something. And it's really sad to see. So yeah, you're right. We do need to sort of step in there and give them some extra assistance with that.
Yeah. And so I know that you know, that I've worked with hypnotherapists before, and it didn't quite work well for me, with what I was trying to achieve at that time, which was around a fear of heights, and I haven't quite shifted that one yet. But I know that I personally have done work with you, and we didn't go near the fear of heights, by the way, if anybody's wondering why if I still talk about this if I've still got fear of heights. I haven't gone there. And the reason, you know, and I'm a coach, and I've been reflective and self-developing for as far as I can recall. And I came to you and I said, you know, and we've known each other for a few years now, I said, there is something that I can't get to. Like, I can, if you ask me what are my limiting beliefs, and I know a lot of people perhaps won't know those yet, you know, I had the list, I knew what they were, I knew intellectually what they could be, I could even see some of the memories, and I said, you know, these memories keep coming to me, so I felt pinpoint where they're coming from. And I've tried forgiveness work and releasing work and meditation, and I'd done different things, and I was like, there is something that's there that I can't clear and I can't shift. So, you know, how do we work together? And it was that, you know, for me, it was that sense of clearing. That was the word that keeps coming to mind, is that clearing. And as you say, it needed, that permission needed to be built with my unconscious. And I think it's fair to say that my unconscious, I'm not comparing myself to anybody else, but has a stubborn streak to it. At least that's what it felt like they said. And it really needed to build that security around letting that journey happen, and that clearing. Because it just, you know, as I said, I could see it, I could make sense of it, I could analyze it, I could see what I wanted to do with it. and yet I just couldn't shift it. And with the work that we did, it meant that this bit could let go of it, and the other bit could actually go in and do the work that was needed to shift those pieces. And it was that sense of unstuck, you know, in those areas, and a new flow of things coming in. And the other thing that I'll just add to that was, you know, my experience, and it's still, you know, I'm still on a journey with it, is one of the things that I remember saying often in the past is, you know, I want to remember all the happy memories of things that I really wanted, and yet, you know, I know that we as humans have this sort of tendency to remember the negative or the thing. And actually, one of the things that I've really enjoyed through the shifting of those bits is because that has sort of, those have gone, or they haven't got the emotion attached to them anymore. They're just a piece, and it kind of floats around. Is all those other things are emerging, because I can remember that person, that experience, that situation, that time frame in a different way. So there's so many aspects to this, and everybody's going to be coming for a different reason or purpose, aren't they?
They are, and it's always, again, the first session I have with a client, I always explain how the brain works. I feel that this is where the neuroscience comes in. But if you don't know and understand how it works, then it can be quite frightening, because you don't know why you're thinking like this or feeling like this. And to put it in the simplest way possible, when you're someone that's been anxious for a long time, or you've been in a really dark place for quite so many years, you basically live in that survival part of your brain, the limbic system, the emotional brain, which is down there. And you are naturally going to be in survival mode, which means you will be thinking negatively and obsessionally, and your IQ will dip by up to 50%. And you will basically be doing your coping mechanisms and everything else. And you'll wonder why you keep sabotaging yourself, or, you know, why you, and of course you don't have access to all those happy memories readily because you're in survival mode. It wouldn't be particularly helpful if you had a bear running at you to be, you know, thinking, oh, everything's nice in the world kind of thing. So it's just making people realize that it's normal. What isn't normal is that some people live down there most of the time, and that's going to, again, see the world through a filter of all of that. Now, again, when you're down there, you're going to be, you get sort of memories that are stored in the hippocampus. So you've got the amygdala, which is kind of like the alarm system, which is looking out here for all of the dangers. But then you've got the hippocampus, which is where all of those phobias and traumas and triggers and coping mechanisms and emotional memories are stored. The long-term memories are up here, right? The cerebral cortex. But you don't need that when you're in survival mode. So basically, it's no wonder you've got quick access to all the negative moments and frightening things, but you can't get access to all the rest of it. So what we're basically doing is helping a person to empty all of those out and sort of move them up, if you like, because they're then looped through the front bit, analyzed and processed, because trauma, it's a different way of working. You don't actually have time to process the information because it comes, it's a shock. It's very emotional, and your amygdala says, well, I haven't got time to kind of have a think about this. I'm just going to take a snapshot of all of the sensory data, and I'm going to store that as raw information in the hippocampus so it can be got at quickly. But the problem with that is it doesn't understand it. So in other words, if anything similar looks a bit like it, sounds a bit like it, or anything else, suddenly you're in panic mode, and the conscious mind is looking out here going, there's nothing wrong out here. Why am I panicking like this? And again, if you don't understand how this works, that's where panic attacks and things can happen, because you're like, am I having a heart attack? Why am I so anxious right now? So basically, it's a way of keeping the amygdala asleep so that we can then revisit these memories, but in a safe and controlled way, so that the front bit can look at it and go, aha, I understand this now. I'm safe. I can now give that the stamp of approval and move it up into the hard drive, so that there is no trigger anymore. This is now reasonably empty, except for the things that you clearly need to have in there. And therefore, you don't need to be living down here anymore. You can be back up here in the kind of executive part of your brain. And when you're up here, you're going to be positive, you're going to be logical and rational, and you're going to be able to solve problems and focus. You know, that's where we should be living most of the time. But because of society and the levels of stress and the fact that no one really understands about these programs and things that are running in the background. So some people just say the words, this is just the way I am. And I say, well, it's the way you are now, but it doesn't have to be like that. Things like panic attacks can be solved in just a few sessions, because it's not the panic attack that's the problem, it's the trigger that's causing that, and the mechanisms that are happening. And there's all kinds of things that we can do to adjust that. But if you just struggle on and you don't put your hand up, we can't help you. So that's one thing I would say. Never be afraid to put your hand up and say, look, I need some help. And for men out there, they're like, I don't want to talk about my feelings and sit on a couch and be psychoanalyzed. The good news is, with the method that I use and the people I train this, you don't need to know the content, right? I don't need to know what happened.
Yep.
So you're going to go inside and fix yourself. Not that you're broken, but what you think you are. But basically, you're going to revisit these things, and I still won't know what you're looking at, what happened, but you won't feel it anymore. So therefore, there's not much talking involved. This is not counseling. When you go into counseling, it can be good to get it off your chest and everything else. But for some people, talking about a traumatic event, they can leave feeling worse than when they walked in, right? There is a place for counseling, but you've got to pick the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
All right.
And absolutely, and I want to sort of expand that a little bit in that, again, because having experienced this with you, when we are going back into a memory, the way that it's done is, I want to say safe, but it's not reliving it in a place of terror and fear, or it's done in a way, and it's that one time, and it's very quick, and it's done very, very quickly, and it's not, it's not rehashing it and going through it over and over and over again, and it's not, oh my god, I don't want to go there. I mean, I'm not saying it's without any kind of emotion, because with a release can sometimes come emotion, and in that moment of starting, there's a little breath, and then we kind of go into it. So for anybody that's sat there thinking, oh my goodness, that's it, I can reassure you from experience, albeit obviously taking that step. And also, some people will be listening to this and thinking, oh my goodness, but I'm not in a really dark or thing. And so there is a spectrum of of where people are going to come, or where it perhaps is one thing that's showing up predominantly in one area of their life. Yes, it is resonating probably across, because how we do one thing is quite often how we do or shows up across things. So it can be that it's really showing up in one area and it hasn't yet been noticed, or it hasn't yet expanded across other areas. So people who are listening, that there is a spectrum of where it can come up.
Not everybody's going to need some of the more detailed and extensive things. It's just to say that everybody's got trauma, whether they realize it or not. And trauma doesn't have to be like a war zone or a car accident or abuse or something like that. It's basically any kind of event that was incredibly emotional or shocking for you. And that could be the loss of a loved one. It could just be that you were bullied or anything, and obviously to someone else that may not have been traumatic, but it is to you. It's relevant, right? So the idea being that these techniques are designed for people who really are at the other end, where they have been to literally a war zone, and it wouldn't be very good if by revisiting that they were having a really bad time. The point is, it keeps that part of the brain asleep. And I want to say, when I say asleep, I just mean you're not triggered emotionally, because you're so removed from it that you can be objective and stay in the front part of your brain, so that you can deal with it and analyze it and sort it out and release it. And the other thing to say is, this is not deep trance or hypnosis. So when you see someone on the stage and go sleep, it's not like that. You will be having a two-way conversation. You will be fully aware of what's going on in the room. And that's the other beauty of it, which is that you're in control. You will remember all of it. Yes. And when you come out of it, we test it thoroughly to the point where it's not, has it worked? It's unquestionable, because you just can't feel the emotion anymore, right? You get to keep all of the things about the memory that you are helpful, the lessons, the learning, all the positive things, and you've released the trauma and the emotions and the triggers, which mean that what's left is the best of everything. Because something I would like to say is, if you've had a really tough time in your life, you've got to see the positives in that, right? It's made you wise, it's made you strong, it's made you independent and adaptable, and you get to keep all of those mechanisms and strengths that have come out of it. The difference is that you're not relying on those, or those, I mean, any strength taken to an extreme becomes a weakness, right? So if you're being controlled by those mechanisms rather than you choosing when you're going to use those, then that's not very healthy. So you get to keep all of those mechanisms and tools and skills and strengths, but you remove everything that doesn't belong or isn't serving you on a day-to-day basis.
And I was just thinking then, listening to you, is, you know, how do people perhaps recognize, you know, that this could be the useful tool? And I think what was coming up for me then is perhaps, and I'm going to sort of share some thoughts that are coming to me as examples, so perhaps you can say yay or nay or expand where we go, is, you know, if we feel that we keep going to an emotional place, there's, you know, there's kind of stuckness around an emotional place, a feeling that we, you know, we're not shifting, that, you know, whether it's a sadness or a real sense of lack of confidence somewhere, you know, because it can show up, as we know, in different places, or as you say, a fear, anxiety sensation that keeps triggering or perhaps gets worse, a voice, or, you know, a memory that you know, I know a lot of people remember teachers, for example, or a family member saying one thing. Yeah. And even though they can, you know, look at it and say, okay, you know, I was 4, I was 7, and I don't believe that anymore. But it keeps, you know, it's not shifting. We're struggling to shift a thought, a memory, and it's something that we just know we want to get rid of, because we've kind of tried it, we get a bit fed up with, oh, here we go again, or, you know, thing. And I think that's really what comes up for me as a tool for this. And so yes, I don't know if there's other if they're useful examples, or if there's others that you can add, so people can help identify, you know, this is the tool that will really help me with moving forward and shifting.
So again, it comes back to it. So let me elaborate a bit on how these programs and patterns and things are created.
Please.
So as we said, our brain is not fully developed until we're 21 years old, right? And sometimes even then it's not for some people. Anyway, so basically between the ages of 0 to 1, you're in what we call a delta brainwave state. Now, delta for an adult is when they're in deep sleep, which is why a baby is asleep most of the time. Between the ages of about sort of 1 to 2 and then up to about 7 or 8, you're in what we call theta. Now, theta brainwaves are the equivalent to what I would put someone into some deeper hypnosis, right? When they are literally in a very relaxed state, their eyes are closed and they've gone, and they are where they are in that learning state. So imagine this: if you're in a constant theta trance-like state between the age of 1 to 7, then you're like a sponge. And the reason that you're like that is because no matter how good your parents are and how thorough your teachers are, they can't teach you the subtleties of becoming a well-adjusted human being. So you are in this learning state so that you can really just absorb everything that's going around and learn through copying and everything else. However, there are downsides to that, in the sense that because you do not have the front part of your brain in action yet, it doesn't sort of work yet. What's going on here is the front part of your brain is where your personality lives, and it's where your reasoning is, and how you analyze and rationalize and kind of put scenarios through and really understand things. When you're not able to access any of that, you take things very literally, right? And when you're a teenager, it changes slightly and you can reason a bit, but it's very black and white thinking. So coming back to the theta, when you say something to a child, like you're so naughty, or stop doing that, you're bad, they're not going to say, oh, you mean because you're trying to cook right now and I'm messing around, I'm being a nuisance. They will take it very personally, right? Why would you be saying this to me if it wasn't, I'm a bad thing, right? And then, of course, the reticular activating system's been listening to that, and it's now looking for evidence from other people and situations that reaffirm that that's true. And then that program or belief will then continually run in the background. And even though when you get to 21, suddenly this works and is now fully developed, and you can, as I said, stack up a load of information logically about why this is ridiculous, there is a little kid that lives in this part of your brain, because your unconscious is like a 4-year-old. It never really grows up. It's very emotional. And it's, again, takes things very literally. So there's going to be that conflict where you're saying one thing, but you feel another. And it's very interesting to me to see how people cope differently with a belief like that. You talk about pandemic. I would say the biggest pandemic is the belief that we're not good enough. Like, and it's amazing. I know that like 90% of the people that sit on that couch are going to have a variation on I'm not good enough that's really sabotaging their lives. So knowing that to be true, when your brain starts to sort of grow up, this is where the split comes. So what we do with the method that I use and teach is we take someone back to the moment where they made that decision. But the difference is they're not the same as they were when they were that kid. They suddenly have access to all of this. And obviously they're older, they're wiser, they've lived a bit. A lot of the time they're parents themselves. And when they sort of look down at that, because they're not in it, they're detached enough to be able to see that, they look around and they say, this makes no sense to me. I made a mistake. It's a misunderstanding. And therefore, suddenly this belief is like a rock that you just drop. You're like, whoa, that doesn't make any sense. We then deal with the emotion around that so that we separate you from that. And then what's left is we take you back into the memory without that, you know, with these new understandings and with these new emotions of confidence. And then you look around and you're like, you're rewriting history. And then we collapse all of the other ones on the way back. And then we go forwards to give you an experience of what life is going to be like, because the situations aren't going to change, but you're different now. Because the trigger isn't there, the feeling is gone. So what's left is an adult who can actually take a step back and suddenly go, that's weird. It feels different. I don't have to keep saying yes to people if I don't want to, or what, you know, whatever it is. They don't feel the same. And it's almost like unlocking the prison door that was their own make. You know, it's been open the whole time, but basically we give them a chance to have the conversation with that little kid in their brain. And, you know, when I'm dealing with a belief, they will literally speak to that little kid and it can get very emotional. You know, usually tears of relief and happiness. And like, this little kid's been locked in a cupboard for, you know, however many years. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with you. There was never anything wrong with you. And in that moment, it's just like they let go and all of this emotion and relief comes out. And I get emotion thinking about it because it's giving somebody that gift. I can't believe I get paid to do this sometimes. You know what I mean? I do it for free. It's more like a mission if I didn't have a mortgage over my head. And that's why I teach it, because I can't help everybody, but I can help other people. So I'm helping people I don't even get to meet. And I think that's an amazing gift to be able to give to people. So
it is. And I for one am one of many people that are very grateful to have both met you, and we've had lots of conversations around all aspects of mind over the time, and to have worked with you as well. And again, it is, you know, I think the point of reiterating, if I can get the word out, you know, is that sense of perhaps we have, you know, we can sit there and, you know, with this analytical part of our brain and say, well, of course that doesn't make sense. And yet, for some reason, we can't shift that didn't make sense to that true belief of letting go, of that no longer being that belief. It comes from a different place, a different understanding, a different acceptance, different releasing, whatever words we want to use. And it is, and this is why, you know, part of the title for today was I used hypnotherapy for shortness, but you know, your combination of hypnotherapy with NLP, using neuroscience, you know, that it creates profound change and quickly. And, you know, that release is quick. And you know, and then, you know, there may be things that then release as well in the future as you kind of go through. It's but it is that sort of instant, you know, change as well. And it just it's a sense, isn't it? It's a feeling as much as anything else that they get to do.
It takes for most people it's an average of 4 sessions.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because everything's connected to everything else, and you know, habits suddenly become just that. They're not needed anymore. And it's, I mean, I used to laugh because it's a terrible business model if people only need to see you for 4 sessions, because I know that a lot of therapists are like, you know, 10 sessions or years. It's like psychotherapy and psychiatry and things like that. And obviously there are some serious things that I won't deal with, like schizophrenia and things like that. But, you know, most things, like we're talking, you know, pretty much everything except the really psychotic kind of episodes and things like that can be dealt with this. And I do use other stuff as well. I have now started doing the past life regression and some of the other stuff that you've been talking about. But really, that's that's more of a kind of, let's explore this, whether you believe it or not, rather than it's needed. I mean, hypnotherapy can also be used to help the mind to release physical issues like pains. There's even research now that suggests that it can actually help with things like cancer and all kinds of other things, because your body is trying to communicate with you. When you aren't dealing with these trapped emotions and traumas and triggers, your body, you know, new German medicine, and you've probably heard of Louise Hayes, and there's Dolores Cannon's daughter, Julia Cannon. They wrote books on the fact that they are just seeing time and time again that the part of the body that's affected, it's telling you what you're angry about or what you're traumatized about. And really you start to understand that unless you're dealing with these emotional things, then these physical ailments that kind of progressively get worse, it's your body saying, are you going to deal with this yet? Are you going to look at this? Are you going to feel it? So what I would say is it shouldn't really get to that point. And I think everybody should, it's a healthy thing to go and get some therapy, you know. It's not a stigma anymore around that. So
and I think, you know, and I think that, you know, one of the reasons I have these conversations is so that people get to know about it, because the thing is, if people have no idea that there is a tool available, or that, you know, that they might understand, like they might know, or they might get a sense of when I'm stressed or when I'm upset, my body reacts in a certain way, so they can make the link between emotion and health. But the other side of it, and people, if people aren't given the guidebook, if people aren't, you know, told there is a guidebook, because we have, you know, our world, for whatever reason, we have moved away from learning about ourselves and our body and our instincts and our intuition. We focus so much on the education system, and I don't mean necessarily just schooling, but on our cerebral. And there has been a big shift, you know, I believe, and I think there is a big shift going on at the moment, of really getting people to say, look, there is more than thinking. There is so much, you know, thinking is kind of like the last piece, or a bit of it, or whatever. And there is this, you know, our instincts, we've moved away from understanding our instincts and trusting our instincts, or intuition, if you prefer intuition, you know, our gut, our heart, you know, and what is our body telling us. And, you know, people think, you know, words, but perhaps there's wisdom in some of those words. And, you know, when we say, oh, I get a pain in the neck, well, that's telling us something. Our headaches are telling us something. Our illnesses, our ailments, they're all telling ourselves something. And there are, you know, like Louise Hayes has written very helpful guidance, as you say, about what your body or ailment or illness might be telling you. And when I've gone and looked at it, not just for myself but others, you know, in the past, I've looked at it and thought, yep. You know, so it's you can look at it yourself, and whether you get it or believe it or don't believe it, you can see it in black and white and think, oh yeah, there's something in that.
And once you understand what those signs are and what those body ailments mean, I could literally get someone to list them to me, and I bet I could say, oh, did someone leave you when you were a kid? There was a divorce in the family? Was it this and that? And they're like, oh my God, how do you know that? And it's just because you can tell a lot about a person from what physical things are going on. Something else you mentioned there was the fact that it's not all about thought all the time. Well, actually, I would say that one of our biggest problems is we overthink everything. And I found that the more intelligent that a client is, the more they're good at making themselves feel bad. And I do say that to them. I'd say, you've got really good at making yourself feel bad. And it's really about that. And this is, again, where I recommend things like mindfulness and meditation and learning how to quieten the mind. Because the truth is, you can't think your way out of it. In fact, when you try and think when you're down here, what you're going to do is you're going to make it worse. It's like trying to clean a dirty pond by working really hard and stirring up the mud even more. You've got to just stop and let the water, just the mud, settle to the bottom. It's really how the mind works. It's when you feel anxiety and emotions that are like that, it's basically like the warning lights come on in your car, that it's going to overheat because you're overthinking everything. You sped up so much and you've got so worked up. Your body's going, danger, danger, calm down. And if you don't, then it will stop you one way or the other, because it's saying, well, I'm going to have to intervene here you're going to get sick, or you're going to have a headache, or you're going to have a panic attack, or whatever it is. The point is, we have to learn to stop and slow down. And one thing about the lockdown that really did sort of help a lot of people was they were forced to stop and slow down and reevaluate. And things, and that's the other thing, things did start to come up,
Yes,
whether they liked it or not. So for some people, they're like, I need my distractions. I need to get working and busy again. Actually, this is the perfect opportunity for you to really look at it and to let it, to work through it finally. Because, you know, if not now, then when? Like, you can suffer as long as you want to, but what would it be like if you could literally let go of it all in just a few sessions? I'd pay that money, and I have, actually.
Yes. And you know, I don't know what else to say for that, because it is that, and as you say, a lot of people have suddenly been, you know, and this is the other part of it, isn't it? Is that a lot of people have suddenly left in a place where there is all this space, and they're not accustomed as well, you know, even if we're not talking about necessarily the trauma stuff, but unaccustomed to letting the feels out, you know. So we're very good at, oh, starting to feel uncomfortable, don't think about it. Starting to feel, you know, upset, no, push that emotion back. And actually, again, if it's not necessarily about necessarily letting it all out in the sense of, you know, rage or whatever, but actually, you know, our body, you know, like homeostasis, self-regulating, and, you know, it often comes up if we look at a child, you know, a toddler, and they have a full-blown temper tantrum, and then they, you know, they just feel it, and it comes to an end. You know, sometimes I know people have longer ones, but you know, it comes to an end, and then they're back to being happy again, and they're not, you know, they're judging themselves for having a temper tantrum, but because, you know, it's like crying, it's designed for a reason, and if we let that out, actually it shortens the cycle and it lets us re-regulate. And we've got so used to not thinking about things that are uncomfortable, or not feeling things that we feel like are uncomfortable, and that adds to it in some ways.
It's definitely a mechanism. So our body has an immune system, but our mind has an immune system as well. It's a self-correcting system, right? It wants to bring you back to balance or homeostasis, as you said. Now, again, as you were saying, when these things come up, our tendency is to go, oh no, I don't want to feel that, and to shove it back down. But really what you're doing is you're kind of going against the system. And, you know, that's why a kid can be having a tantrum one moment and be laughing the next moment, because the system is let it all out and then it's corrected. But when we get older, we can kind of push against that and kind of just counteract it. So the point I'm trying to make is, if we let it come up and we just sit with it and feel it, it wouldn't, without getting in the way, it just releases, it just comes out. And when it comes out, it's gone. I mean, forever. But when you've got a lot and you keep shoving it down and it's been like that for a long period of time, then it just gets more, it's like it's just growing like this. And if you don't let it out gradually as and when it comes up, then it's going to just explode and you're going to be in crisis all the time. It's like I say, it's like a balloon that goes up, and the more you think to try and sort it out, the bigger it gets, until that's all you can focus on, and then it bursts, you're in a crisis. The point is, if you let things come and let the mind and get out of the way. So this is what meditation is and things like that. It's when you quieten the mind, the body goes, oh, thank God, I can now get rid of and release some of this stuff. And that's what's happening during lockdown. You know, the body's going, well, this is, you know, I'm at home. There's nothing going on. This is a good time to let out some of that stress. And people are like, they've got nowhere to go. So it's, and if you don't really understand why your body's like, why am I feeling like this? Why am I in crisis all of a sudden? Actually, it's your body trying to help you, but you've got to change your relationship with what anxiety and things are. It's not this thing that's trying to run after you or trying to get you. It's your body's way of, you know, like the rumble strips on the side of a motorway. You start falling asleep and then it goes, good done, good done, good done. And you go, oh, you wake back up, right? Anxiety is basically just a way of your body telling you that your brain is starting to overheat and it's time to come down. But also emotions, when we label them as good or bad, that's when we start making meaning. And meaning is the thing that gets us, you know, like you wake up. If you woke up in the morning and you were in a really good mood and you felt happy, you wouldn't be like, why am I feeling like this? This is really weird. Like, you wouldn't question it. But when we feel that there's some kind of emotion that we label as bad, you start up the kind of the word in the English language that's going to get you into the most trouble is the word why.
Oh, yes.
When you say why, start the interpreter function up in your brain, and its job is to make meaning, even if there isn't any. And it's gonna, if you're in a bad mood and you say, why am I feeling like this? It's gonna go, because of
Here
this,
you
because of this, because of this. And that can perpetuate. It's the same with a panic attack. What's happening is you're getting a squirt of adrenaline, and if you didn't actually overthink that and you were just like, oh, there's just a bit of adrenaline going, it would stop after a few minutes because the adrenaline rush would run out. But when you start going, why is this happening? I'm going to die. It's just squirt, squirt, squirt. And then, of course, it just keeps going. So we're the ones that keep it going. If we just got out of the way and learned to quieten the mind and get out of our head and just be, we're human beings, not human thinkings. It's obviously it's easier said than done. And if it's a problem that's been going for a long period of time and you've got anxiety disorders and things like that, then obviously seek professional help. But for most people, once you've dealt with all of those things and you understand and you're educated in this way, it doesn't need to be this way. It's understanding is the key.
It is. And, you know, sadly, when we ask some of these questions of why, unlike a computer, you know, our brains don't say, I'm really sorry, you know, no search results available. It just tries to find something, you know, and it will just give you whatever, you know, whatever it can to help you prove, you know, why am I useless? Oh, you know, it doesn't come back saying there's no search results found because you're not. It just kind of goes, what, you remember this thing that happened 2,000 years ago?
It would just give you, and it's the best special effects studio in the world. So it's really real. So whether there's a bear running at you or you close your eyes and imagine there's a bear running at you, your brain and body are going to start reacting as if that's really happening. So really it's just think, the moment you start asking questions like, what if, you know that is the beginning of a disaster, because your brain will give you the answer to that and it will show you things and it will just do things. And you're not here, you've gone, you're up there. Like if you're fully present, right here, right now, you've got nothing on your mind, you're really in the room or you're really listening to the person you're speaking to, what problems have you got? None. Because in order to have a problem, you've got to go up, you've got to remember, you've got to overthink it, and you've got to create those pictures and those movies. And before you know it, the emotions come, which then drives your behavior. And it's just a perpetuating system. But at any moment, you can fall out of your thinking, I'm back, right? Look around the room, one step at a time. Like, you don't have to have it all figured out all of the time. We're the only animal that does this. If a bird wants to fly to a branch, it doesn't go, what if a cat comes? What if the branch snaps? What if I don't even make it that far? It will just fly to the branch. Now, any one of those things may happen, but it will adapt in the moment. And so will you. You need to give yourself more credit, you know?
And it will have some, you know, it may not be one, but it will obviously also know what might be the danger signs so that they're going to pick a branch that is the most, you know, is the branch to go to. But there's not, the emotions aren't going to be there, but it will have, you know, it will just have analysed it in a different way innately.
And I'm not saying don't plan.
No, I know you weren't saying.
But there's a difference. There's a line. When you cross the line from planning to catastrophizing,
that's it. That's a great description. Or again, it's that instinct level. Like instinctively, they will go, that's the branch I need to go to, I want to go to, and they'll have just taken into account those factors, and then they'll, you know, go there. Was there anything? I can't remember. There's something that was leading to my thought. I'm conscious of time. Is there anything you feel, before we kind of just kind of wrap up with a little bit about kind of moving forward? Is there anything that you feel has been left unsaid? She says, you know, trying to fit everything about that you need to say in an hour. I appreciate.
I think we've covered a lot of ground. I would say my main message, I guess, and it's not even necessarily to see me, but I would just say you don't have to struggle. Like, mental health is not what it used to be. Going to see a therapist is not what it used to be. It can be very discreet. It can be very normal. It can be very quick. It doesn't have to be expensive. Like, get it sorted out. With me, those first sessions are controlling stress, releasing all of that. Then we do all of your trauma in one session. believe it or not, and it really is gone forever. Then we do your emotional triggers. Basically, when something happens out here and then you're in a rage or you're really sad or whatever it is, we take the trigger away, not the emotion. Like if it's still appropriate, you can feel any one of those emotions, but we're taking away the trigger that points at it at the moment because it gives you choice and control back. Then we deal with any limiting beliefs and then any habits or anything last, so that you're now not making new problems and new things. Because before I kind of figured out the last stage, we would sort all of the past stuff out. And then in 6 months, they would come back and they would say, it hasn't worked. And I would say, it has worked. It's just that you've just created a whole load of new stuff. So we kind of at the end help you to figure out how you're creating this stress and these issues. And we deal with that last. So 4 sessions for most people, it's done. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help. That's what I would say.
Thank you. And just sort of one thing, just because I was just very conscious then that some people might be thinking of habits of creating an exercise routine habit. And, you know, what we're talking about here are the things of the habits that we keep falling into in ourselves and our behaviors and our patterns. So just in case anybody's confused about creating habits of, like you say, releasing versus creating. So there's no questions, but there's a comment of, you know, that somebody's been reading around this recently and they found it really interesting. So if anybody has any questions when you're watching this, please do just pop your comments in below. So James, what I'd like to know is how can people work, you know, how can they find out more? How can they work with you? You've mentioned the Mind Reboot. So if they want to come to work with you as, you know, one of your clients, the Mind Reboot, and we'll put your contact details in below. How else can they work with you?
You can have a look at the website, which is theliberatedmind.co.uk, or you can follow me on Facebook, and that's The Liberated Mind UK. I've got a YouTube channel where you can just see me having little tips like this if you want, or yeah, just give me a call. Always happy to talk.
Thank you. And also, if anybody wants to learn how to do this themselves, so if there's any therapists, coaches, any kind of practitioners out there, then they can also get in contact with you in the same way to find out how they can run the Mind Reboot program.
The only thing I would say about that is you have to already be qualified in something, right? These are tools.
Yes.
So you have to have, you need to be a practitioner of sorts, because there is no qualification that I'm offering. I'm offering you a process or some tools to take people through.
Yeah. So for example, you know, a qualified coach, so they've already qualified in that or in something else, you know, like you say, a therapist, practitioner.
Everything else in place.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. Well, we've come to the end of our hour. James, thank you so much for that conversation and for sharing all of that insight and wisdom. And I very much look forward to seeing where you go next, because I suspect it's going to be, well, it's already great things, but I suspect it's going to be even greater things given everything that you do and share. So thank you so much again for today. And, you know, as always, I'm very grateful with the people that I get to know and the people that are in my life. So a personal thank you as well for everything that you've done with me and our friendship as well.
Thank you for having me on. And yeah, it's been a great conversation. It's been fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, James.